So we are broadcasting, and we're just gonna hold on a second, make sure we got a good connection, and then we can do a roll call, I think. Okay, Mike Dissett, are you there with us?
I'm here. Mike Dissett.
Hi, Mike. Sorry, I didn't realize you didn't have the meeting link, and I was in some Zoom meetings when you sent your email, so my apologies.
Well, there was a link printed on the agenda that Kate sent around, and so I don't know if it looks different, but I don't know if it's the same one that you just sent me.
No. So members have a panelist email invitation. That's the designated one to use if you have it prior to the meeting. The general public has a link that's on the city's website, and that's just a generic link, so they can listen in. And then public speaking is allowed for those folks only when public comment is warranted.
So the link on the agenda that was sent was the general public link.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do any members have any questions about that, just while we're on that subject matter, just to make sure everything's running smoothly for future meetings or startups?
It's Ron Ziemba. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Andy, I have a question, Andy.
Yes.
It's Mark Rosen. How you doing? Is it the same link every time we have a meeting?
That's correct. For every CPC meeting, it'll be that same email, that same link that you'd want to use. So just hang on to that.
Okay.
That should have you all set every time.
Okay. All right. Yep. I'll save it. Thanks.
Just got to remember where you put it.
Right.
So Mike, I'll defer to you then. I think we're all set to go.
Okay, Andy, are there any magic speeches you've got to give in advance of these Zoom meetings?
Sure, I'll give if it's all right with you, I'll just give a quick intro. The Community Preservation Committee, like all the other boards of the city, are having their meetings online right now because of the COVID-19 situation. So some of you may already know that or attended other city meetings. That's kind of universally how we're handling public meetings at this point, since we can't really meet at City Hall or any other public building right now in groups. So if anybody's interested in speaking from the general audience, there's the ability to do that by clicking on the raise hand button, which is down the bottom of the screen. For those calling in, I'm told that if you press *9 that may do it for you. But I'll leave it to the chair if there's any appropriate time for public comment. I don't think tonight's agenda calls for a public comment. I think it's board discussions.
Right.
But if the board wants to take comments from anybody or needs information, I think there's someone here from the Custom House that may be interested in addressing some things if the commission has questions. So at any rate, that's the way to let us know that you're interested in speaking. But I think tonight's agenda is primarily a discussion among committee members following the agenda, which I'll pull up in just a second for you.
Okay, thanks, Andy. This is Mike Dissett. And at 7:09 p.m., I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the Community Preservation Committee. And I would like to take a roll call, find out officially who's here. So if you could unmute yourselves and respond in the affirmative if you're here, respond in the negative if you're not. Jane Healy.
Here.
Don Little.
Don Little here.
Paul Healy.
Here.
I don't know, is Dan Kane coming around anymore, or is he not? Dan?
Dawn Walters is on phone, just to let you know.
Okay. Okay, so apparently Dan is not present, and we weren't sure if he was going to continue after the vote. Mark Rosen.
I am here.
Thank you. Don Waters on the phone.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Ron Zimba.
I'm here too.
Okay, and Mike Doucette, the chair, is here. Thank you, folks. So we have received from our package for the meeting, including the agenda, staff reports, updates, a new schedule showing outstanding amounts of from prior awards, and I think that about covers it. Oh, a copy of the City Council order, which we will talk about, and hopefully Andy will be able to shed some light on what the amendments were that are referenced but not included. Okay, first item on the agenda is the request from the Custom House for extensions on their two outstanding grants, and I understand that Doug Muir and Joan Whitlow are here. So I'd like to start off by referring you to, in your packet, the letter dated June 17, 2020 from the Custom House, which explains the reasons they are requesting extensions on each of these grants. So let's start this first with, I'll entertain a motion to approve the request for both grants and a second. Are there any out there? Okay. Committee
Jane
members?
Healy, so moved.
Say that again, please.
Jane Healy, so moved.
Okay, we have a motion from Jane. Second, please.
Second.
Okay, I think the first voice I heard was Paul. Paul, was that your second?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. All right, now open this up to discussion. Does anybody have any questions or comments? All right. Hearing none, we should, I think I would like to recognize Doug or Joan to weigh in briefly before we have the vote and see if we need any further discussion. Doug or Joan, you have the floor if Andy would arrange that.
All right, this is Doug Muir. Can you hear me?
Yes, Doug, thank you.
I don't know that I need to present anything other than what's in the letter, but I'm happy to answer questions. I think the letter speaks for itself. I mean, because of the change of ownership, the awarding of the grant was delayed by the City Council. Ultimately, it was awarded and we signed a grant agreement. But meanwhile, we lost a year in terms of the slate roofer on the slate roofing project. We did complete the work. We completed the work in early 2020. Meanwhile, of course, as you folks, I'm sure well know, because of issues with a CPC award to a church, I believe, the city decided they needed to redo all the preservation restriction agreements for nonprofits and so on. And so we have been in the process of doing that. Meanwhile, our grant agreements provide that we can't access funds until those restriction agreements are approved by Mass Historic, signed by everyone in the city, and recorded. So that's where things stand as far as the two grants. We decided, as the letter indicates, that it would not be prudent for the museum to go ahead and spend money on the climate control work until we at least knew we were close to being able to access the $100,000 plus reimbursement for the slate roof work. Good thing I think we decided that, because Meanwhile, COVID intervened, and like all nonprofits and most organizations, we've been burning cash to keep ourselves afloat. So that's where things stand.
Okay, Doug, this is Mike Doucette. A couple of questions. One is, I understand that the slate roof, all the work has been done, and you advanced the funds, so the contractors are at this point done and paid, right?
Exactly right.
Okay.
The total cost was 108,000 and change,
Okay.
and we've paid the full amount.
Okay, and the climate control work is now is it waiting on the completion of the revised preservation restriction?
It is.
Okay.
We have proposed contracts from the consultants for the HVAC and the thermal skin in the building and those areas that are going to be climate controlled. But as I said, we didn't feel we wanted we didn't feel it would be prudent to spend $75,000 more until we were closer to the finish line in terms of at least being able to access the award for the slate roof.
Would you say that a safe extension date would be January of 2022?
Yes, I think that would be safe. We'll need to kind of revise our thinking in terms of where we are now on the climate control, because we have done some work with museum funds on galleries in the building. So we'll need to kind of rethink those contracts, but I think January of 2022 would be a fair estimate of where we can end up.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee?
Yeah, Mike, this is Don Walters. Question, Doug, have you submitted the actual preservation request to the State Historical Commission, or is that still in draft form, sir?
Well, for those of you who have dealt with Mass Historic, that's an odyssey. We submitted a proposed restriction in December of 2019. We finally got a comment letter from Mass Historic on March 30, which with 30 items they wanted to see addressed. We have addressed all of the 30 items and have submitted a revised preservation restriction agreement, which we believe and hope complies fully with all of what they wanted to see.
Thank you very much. And as the planning board representative to the Community Preservation Committee, I'm familiar with that. And so if the old expression goes, misery enjoys company, the good news is you're not the only person that has been in this situation.
Don, if you knew how many times we emailed Michael Steinitz, who's the point person at Mass Historic, to try to light a fire, it's just amazing. Yeah, I don't want to complain, but it's.
I understand, sir. Sorry, I just want you, at least I do empathize with you, and Mike and I fully support your suggestion for January 2022, but.
All right, any other questions or comments from the committee? Okay.
I think it sounds good.
Okay. That was Paul speaking, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. I was just going to say, this is Joan Whitlow, and I just want to say that we've been submitting the reports and we will continue to do so. We just wanted to make sure we went through this formality so that people would know the logic and the reason, because I think your later agenda items are about money still not spent. So we wanted to make sure that we remained on the book, so to speak.
No, we appreciate that, because by our own processes, every 12 months this should happen with incomplete projects.
Right.
And as we will be discussing later in the meeting, we are also finding additional conditions being imposed by the city council that sometimes puts additional conditions similar to this for periodic reporting.
Right.
So, okay, so if I could have an amendment to include in Jane's original motion that the date for extension for both of these projects would be out to 2022, January 2022. Do I have such an amendment?
So moved.
Sure, Don Walters, so moved.
Okay, and a second?
I'll second. This is Paul.
Hi, Paul. Thank you. Okay, then I'd like to, as amended, first let's do this the way that they've told me to do it. Let's vote on the amendment. So the amendment is that the adding the extension date of January 2022 to the original motion, and we'll have to do a roll call. Jane Healy,
Yes.
Don Little,
Don Little, yes.
Paul Healy,
Yes.
Mark Rosen,
Yes.
Don Waters,
Yes.
Ron Zimba.
Yes.
The chair votes yes. Okay, then next is for the motion itself as amended. We'll take another roll call. Jane Healy,
Yes.
Don Little,
Don Little, yes.
Paul Healy,
Yes.
Mark Rosen,
Yes.
Don Walters,
Yes.
Ron Zimba,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Okay, that's been approved. And thank you, Doug and Joan, for attending and shedding light on this for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is just a general discussion on grant extensions. Just to do an intro to that is just in hearing the debate and discussion among the city council committees and among city council on the oversight that they are feeling they need to a greater extent than before on the appropriations once they are approved by city council. I believe we are going to have to pay closer attention to requiring that annual official request, review, discussion by us, and vote on approving the extensions. That being said, we are also, I believe, going to have to be cognizant of additional conditions that may be put on the appropriations, which require either a termination of the appropriation at a fixed date without an extension, or require a vote for an extension, possibly by city council. So at the moment, without those conditions, my suggestion would be for us to continue with our processes, but make sure that each outstanding item has to be revisited at least annually and be extended. Then without, and that's without any superimposed additional condition that might have to answer to city council. Any discussion on that?
Mike,
Go ahead. So, was that
okay.
done?
Well, I think that was Don and Paul. I'll go first.
Sure.
Mike, the one question I have is with respect to if an extension is to be granted, as the city council or perhaps Andy or Caitlin or others in the planning office may provide guidance, before we can act on such an extension, and assuming we would grant it, does the applicant or the person that has the grant, do they actually have to file a request to have it extended, or is this something where we'll just automatically do it? I know it's perhaps a detail, but I think in general, in dealing with the city council, it is prudent to be as specific as possible.
Yeah. Well, our process in the past has been that we respond to a written request. And it can be in the form of a letter, but it's a request that cites a reason, a justification why it hasn't been able to be completed, and what's left to be done. And that's generally what we're looking at when we vote to extend these things.
Mike,
Right, so Mike, just to extend on that, so I guess I was thinking so if we do not receive something, then is it reasonable to infer that the funds will be cut off? In other words, but for a positive action request by the applicant or the person receiving the grant, we do not grant the extension? Again, I know it's a fine detail, perhaps. But,
yeah, this is Andy. Can I speak to that, Mike?
Sure.
There's one important point, I think, also to note, the transition that we made last year to formal grant agreement contracts that are signed, basically the mayor being the chief elected official, signing those contracts with the grant recipients. The prior protocol had been that there's sort of an award letter that comes from the CPC, signed by the chair and signed by the grant recipient, agreeing to the terms of the grant, obviously, and making, certain caveats and references within that letter. Kopelman and Page, our legal advisors, based on, I forget the exact instance, but going back and dealing with some problems we had had in the past, we had gone back and basically updated that protocol to have a formal contract signed properly, in this case by the mayor. The essence of that being that the CPC is technically an advisory board to the city council in making appropriations. The council actually makes the appropriations, and then the mayor, as the chief elected official, will be the one to enter into contracts for those grant agreements to set those details out and to sort of enforce it. The practical reality is that as Mike said, we respond back to people who are asking for an extension on their grant timeframes. We also try to track, and I think that's why you have it further on your agenda tonight, a listing of the outstanding projects and monies. But we wanted to kind of keep tabs on those things a little better, and I know that's why you look for the quarterly reports on projects, and so that you're aware of them. And we can flag them, you can flag them, even if the applicant doesn't come in. But the reason I mentioned the contract, structure of the contract change with the city for these grant agreements, and again, this is based on our legal advice from Kopelman and Page, our legal advisors, as to the proper protocols to follow. Technically, I would argue that, the formal extensions going forward should be signed. Maybe it could be a letter, it could be an email even, but something from the mayor, just confirming that the city has granted or, provided those extensions. I do think because the CPC has for years, done the grant agreements in the form of a short letter and granted the extensions and monitored the projects, I do think it makes sense to do that, at least at a bare minimum, on the projects that the CPC was handling prior to that, last year's transition. I still think it makes good practice to circle back with the CPC regardless. But I think from a technical perspective, the applicant technically needs to get some sort of sign off from the mayor for that extension to the grant agreement. And as Mike, I think, pointed out, it has to be consistent with the city council vote. So if there was a sunset in the city council vote, and we'll speak to some of that later on tonight, there was actually a couple of sunsets that were put on some projects this time around, that those would be part of the stipulation as well. And the CPC would not be able to essentially override the city council on that because the CPC is technically advisory.
This is Mike. I think I understand the process, and I understand the new grant agreement as running between the city, that is the mayor, and the recipient. Andy, remind me, does the grant agreement have the requirement in it that the funds be expended within 12 months, and if they aren't, that they have to come back and ask?
As we discussed here, I can pull up a sample of that. I believe that language is in there because we tried to carry all the basic terms that the CPC had. I'll confirm that as we're talking here, just to get the exact language. But we carried us. What we essentially did was took the form contract for this purpose, that for CPC appropriations and grant agreements that Copeland and Page provided, and they provide to other communities. We used that template. We provided in those details for particular projects, and of course the typical deadlines or caveats that the CPC here would have. And then we added in particular details for the project, or at least references to the associated documentation of that project, to make sure that there was clear reference to what they were allowed to spend the funds for instance. And I'll look for that document right now just to check for you.
Okay, thanks. Well, I think then, I agree that, going forward for the appropriations under those grant agreements, that a sign off on the extension should come from the mayor's office. What I question is whether it's doing a disservice to the mayor just with that office having to deal with that without having some vetting of it and a recommendation coming from us that says we've looked at this request. It's justified, and we recommend that it be extended. Maybe having some kind of a discussion with the mayor's office to lay some groundwork on that, because I also am concerned that in dealing with this process of extensions, that we not step on toes as between council and the mayor's office.
Mike, let me just state for the record that I agree with you on that. The mayor's office, given all the responsibilities that the current mayor and any future mayor may have, I think it definitely makes sense for our office staff, in this case, Caitlin and I, and the CPC itself, to provide that advice before any formal extension is granted, because obviously you're going to know much better on the particular details just based on your focus and bandwidth.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Paul, and I would agree with that. That it would be, it's certainly up to the mayor or whoever is a contract to actually execute the extension. But I really think it would work out better for everyone if we were, just as in we advise the city council to appropriate these grants, we can advise the mayor to issue an extension.
I'd like to circle back to something that Don mentioned, and that's the expectation on the part of the grant recipient that they would be cut off absent a request for an extension, and any unused money be revert. I don't think that is the case. I think the language has always been, it may be clawed back. So, come and ask us, because otherwise it may be clawed back. Part of this is just motivation and oversight that the money that's appropriated is being used for the good works that we've recommended, rather than just sitting. So I guess in dealing with what appears to be a significant list of housekeeping to go out and tap on some shoulders and say, we need a request and justification. Otherwise, this money will revert. I think that might be the way to go on these older ones, rather than rely. I don't think we can rely on any expectation that it'll just disappear. I think it does call for an effort to get their attention, and if that effort fails, then shame on them. But I think that effort ought to be initiated at our end first.
Mike,
this is Paul. I would think that maybe the way to handle this is we let people know that they have to request an extension. And if they don't, if at that point in time, that date, if there's any funds left in their account, that we will freeze that account until they do provide a request. Because, you know, it could well be that they've spent the money, they've paid their contractors, whatever, and they just haven't at that date yet put the bill into the city. So we wouldn't want to just take it away.
Yeah.
But we want to make it.
Mike?
Yeah, who's that?
Mike, I'm sorry, it's Doug Muir again. I
Yes,
just
Doug.
wanted to offer something from the applicant's perspective,
Okay.
because the Custom House has applied for a number of grants and received a number of grants, as you know. And it's never been our expectation until Caitlin contacted us earlier this year that there be any need for an extension. And having been to lots of your meetings and watched lots of situations where monies hadn't been expended when the applicants thought they would be expended, you know, I was a little surprised that there should suddenly be a problem. So my suggestion would be from the applicant's perspective, and as Andy indicated, that all of this stuff, as you finally work it out, work its way into the grant agreement. So when the applicant signs a grant agreement, the applicant knows what the rules are in terms of requesting an extension if needed, justifying it, how that's done, and so on. That would be, again, it's up to you guys, of course, but that's my suggestion from our perspective as an applicant.
Okay.
Mike,
Thanks, Doug. Yeah.
sorry, Mike just said, this is Andy Port. Just to confirm for the record, the contract language does carry that 12-month language. As you'll see, again, for two other items you have on your agenda tonight, which I think were related to this particular issue. One is an update on projects and outstanding funds that are still need to be expended by different applicants and their status. And that's something we want to be reporting back to you on a regular basis with, obviously. So that's part of the reason why part of Caitlin's job is to circle back with applicants and then, you know, let you know where things stand with the updates they give and everything. But I wanted to have sort of a master tracking list, and that's what that's for.
Okay.
The other thing is, you know, that if there's questions with the, you know, concerns about the applicant, you know, not being aware and so forth, I mean, that's the reason why we are, as staff are there. So should there be an issue that arises where there's a potential for the monies to be withdrawn, then obviously part of our role is to figure out, you know, working with the applicant and working with the CPC and the council and the mayor and so forth, what needs to be done. Is there a resolvable situation there? And is there any timeline, for instance, have they expended funds that, you know, or there's certain sort of liability or concern that bills would need to be paid? So obviously part of what we're considering when we report to you and the council and the mayor and others and trying to resolve issues like that is all those factors.
Yeah. I do believe that the language you have confirmed is in the grant agreement is a carry forward of similar language that has been in the grant letter.
Right.
I don't know if I'm not comfortable saying from the beginning, but I think for several years in any event. So
Yeah, I think that goes back, if not to the beginning, almost the beginning.
yeah.
I agree.
Okay. I guess you know, I'm open to suggestions on how to you know, we're not going to resolve this tonight, but on how to set in place a plan to address this issue going forward, cleaning up the old, staying on top of the new, and you know, just the steps that are going to be taken. And I think that would include possibly a subgroup of us taking that on to make the plan, and possibly reaching out to the mayor's office with the concerns that we had about what is it that works best for the mayor in responding to the requests and signing off on them.
Right.
Anybody else got any good ideas here?
No, well, this is Paul. I think we've talked about a number of good suggestions tonight. It's a matter of just kind of reading through those and putting language around them.
Mhm.
And then passing it by the mayor and the city council. And
This is Don Little. I'd just like to reemphasize what Mr. Doucette stated, that yes, the applicant's going to sign a contract saying, you know, you need to expend these funds within 12 months, but I would hope that the planning office of the city sends a reminder in advance of that 12 months as it approaches. Then if we don't hear, we can decide.
I think we've been very, very careful about not yanking funds
right.
over the years, just to avoid, you know, things just having been missed by, you know, largely volunteers out there on the grant recipient end of things.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Could and I understand if people are not able or ready to raise their hand at the moment, but if I don't have a couple of volunteers to at least carry the ball on this tonight, then let's you know, plan on some you know, reaching out to me directly if you think, you know, post meeting you think, yeah, that's something you'd like to do.
Mike,
So-
this is Jane. I'm happy to head that effort up.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Do we have anybody who'd like to assist Jane? If not tonight, then please reach out to her directly by email. Okay. Anything else on the extensions? Okay, we can move on to number 3. That is, there's nothing in your packet about this, I don't believe, but the origin of it was an inquiry from Madeline Nash. I know there are a few of you that remember Madeline from her time as a CPC member from the housing folks, and also as a at-large member, I believe. Anyway, her inquiry was to Caitlin and said, I'm wondering if the CPC has funds earmarked for affordable housing that could be requested in the next few months, that is, not waiting until the next CPC round, to replenish the emergency rental funds if needed. There are predictions that if the eviction moratorium expires, along with enhanced unemployment, there will be an increased demand for rental assistance. Could you inquire about the possibility of the trust, that's the Affordable Housing Trust, seeking CPA funds out of the RFP sequence for that possible purpose? So I just want to put that thought out there with my response to Madeline was that as far as I personally was concerned, I thought that it was would be certainly an emergency to be taken out of sequence, as well as an appropriate use of the funds. And I believe that there are many preservation committees around the Commonwealth that are employing and addressing emergency rental assistance with CPA funds now. Anybody have anything just to comment on that?
This is Paul, and I would certainly agree with that. You know, if that's not an emergency, that's, I don't know what would be.
Yeah.
And also, I'm wondering, do we have anything in the affordable housing sector reserve funds, not reserved for affordable housing trust, but just a general reserve?
I don't believe, I don't believe there is any longer a balance in an affordable housing reserve of the
Oh,
general
okay.
fund. Yeah,
Because that's certainly easier to go after as an emergency.
right.
But in general, yeah, they can absolutely apply to my way of thinking.
Anyone else? Questions or comments?
Don Little, I just had a curiosity question. I don't know, maybe for Caitlin. The email that you read from Madeline, Mike, I thought I heard you use a phrase something like to replenish a rental assistance fund if it is depleted. I mean, is there an existing fund?
I wasn't certain what she was referring to, whether there is an existing fund outside of the Affordable Housing Trust or whether the trust itself has a current rental assistance program. So I'm not sure of the answer to either of those.
Yeah, Mike, this is Caitlin. I can give you a quick update. So just real quick, over the spring, the trust established an emergency housing program, to address, our current public health crisis and, this time of uncertainty. And then the program has been in effect since June. It's run by the Pettingill House, and the trust has already allocated $100,000 to that program. And they've been chipping away slowly at that amount. Right now, it doesn't seem like there's an overwhelming need, for more funds. And so this was kind of just me putting this on your agenda just to kind of let you know that there's a program in place, and potentially maybe an out of sequence application may be submitted to you in the future.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a likelihood if the eviction moratorium stops. So.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else on that?
Hey, Mike. Yeah, Mike, this is Don Walters. On that point, eviction moratorium, I do understand that the federal government has such authority, and I think I'm aware of that the state, the governor, through whatever executive power, has invoked such authority. So the question, and Andy, Caitlin, that's probably a legal issue, but you may know, does the municipality, just bringing it down to each level, does the municipality, i.e. the mayor and or the city council, have the authority to suspend the eviction notices within the city?
I'm not sure.
This is Andy Port. I do not believe, and I'm not the attorney, but I do not believe that the mayor would have that authority locally.
Because the enforcement would be through the state court. So it wouldn't, it would be difficult for a municipality within a county, within Essex County, to say, no, you can't come here to evict people. So that's just my gut reaction. So, okay, any other comments about the affordable housing issue?
Yeah, Mike, it's Ron Ziemba.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure how this works. And also, what has anyone mentioned an amount? Presumably, if we had a motion on this, it would include an amount, an up to amount.
Yes, I believe that when we would get an application, it would have not only amounts, it would have the processes of and the criteria in the program as to what it particularly addresses. And there would probably be that applicants have to meet certain income limits, maximum limits, in order to qualify for the assistance and that type of thing. So I have not yet looked at what other towns have on the books already as these types of programs that were just put in over the last 4 or 5 months. But I think they're out there, and I think that's probably what the trust would be relying on in putting together their own program, is rather than trying to recreate the wheel.
So is that to say, Mike, that any motion that we made would be on the flexibility of our attitude toward doing this rather than granting a certain amount
I
of
think so. You know, that's always part of it. Whether you want to, you know, whether you decide it's eligible, whether you decide it's something you'd like to recommend the money be spent on, and whether you like the details of the plan that's been presented, the plan for the program, as well as the amount, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, well, just
did I
speaking, I don't think I'm ready to do much of that tonight.
Oh, no, we aren't. We don't have anything in front of us tonight.
Oh,
This is just a heads up that it you know, it could be coming down the road, and you know, just to get a sense of the committee that this does fall into an emergency category that people would respond to out of sequence. So.
Okay, so certainly I have no objection at all to anything that's designed to help the community through the COVID crisis. I mean, I think that's a very valid reason for doing something like this. And I can say I would look favorably on a request like that.
Okay, any other comments? Okay. Next item is, okay, we've got a review of the action by City Council on our recommendations in the most recent round. We do have in the packet a copy of the section of the minutes from that City Council meeting where they discussed and voted on it. We do not have similar minutes because I don't believe they're maintained separately for the committee discussions that happened in advance of the full council vote, discussion and vote. But the difficulty in following the bouncing ball on the order that was voted on is essentially that many of them were amended and then voted as amended and passed as amended, but the amendments themselves are not contained within the City Council information. So Andy, I have to confess something on the City Council meeting where the vote was taken. I had a meltdown electronically here on my system, so I did not even make it far enough into the meeting to hear the discussion and the vote. So I'm going to have to rely on your notes and your memory on filling in the blanks here. Okay.
Sure. Yeah. Can you all see the document I have on the screen here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what I've done is that the council order that was drafted by the city clerk's office, I think they've got a lot on their plate right now. So they just kind of quickly drafted together a summary of the discussion that happened at the meeting. Really just the fact that there were motions made and seconded and so forth. But it was a little bit confusing the way that they had drafted it out. And I think we're still waiting for them to get it signed. But because there were several different amendments that were made on the floor during that meeting, it became a little bit harder looking back at the document that they put together to figure out, for people down the road maybe, to figure out exactly what the conditions were or the amendments were that were made on the floor, including some conditions on timing for the use of funds, which is something you were discussing a little while ago. So what I thought would make sense is just to I put together kind of a cheat sheet version of the order with some notes, and I'll go through just to explain to you what the council did as far as some additional caveats they put on the appropriations they made consistent with your recommendations. They still put some caveats on it, so I just thought it would make sense to kind of summarize those for you. And if you have questions, you can let me know.
Yes.
Okay. So the first one, if you can all see here as I'm going along, the down payment assistance program, Councilor Zeid made an amendment that the funds would expire unless there's already a vote taken by the council before then. It would expire on June 30th, 2023. Excuse me, that was an explicit caveat in there. The Newburyport Public Library, this one, the caveat there and the concern was relative to a preservation restriction. And so because the library is under city ownership, there's not the same statutory obligation that the city get a preservation restriction on the building because the city already has some level of protection on it. We obviously still pursue that anyway. But at any rate, what the council was clarifying was just that the funds could be released, again, to another city, another arm of the city, could be released from one arm of the city, the CBC, council side, to the library side, to do the construction prior to the preservation restriction for that building being on record. That was for two reasons. One, because the work involved, which had to do with an HVAC system, wasn't really impacting much of anything historic. And two, because they put a condition on it requiring the Historic Commission to review and approve any plans for the work. So provided those two things are taken care of, there really shouldn't be much concern that, with the city owning it, with the Historical Commission having reviewed and approved plans, and the PR obviously in process, just waiting for finalization and signatures, that there really shouldn't be any concern that the building is going to be demolished or damaged in any way from a historic preservation perspective. So they relaxed the usual boilerplate language we put in that says that the PR has to be recorded prior to the release of funds. That same issue came up with the Cushing House, the number 4 project. And so on that one, they also indicated that funds could be released prior to the recording of the perpetual PR. And the reason why that made sense is because there is already a preservation restriction in place. Although it is not a perpetual restriction, it's 10 years and goes it goes a few years longer than now. So should be plenty of time to get Mass Historical final approval of the preservation restriction so drafted. They also, by the way, a footnote to that one, on this project, the Cushing House, there was a prior year appropriation for electrical work. This year's was for the courtyard. In that floor amendment, they not only made it clear that this year's funds could be released prior to the PR being recorded, but also last year's. I know that Susan Edwards and the society had been working on the PR for some time, I guess, but there was some concern that they could also get access to those funds for work that they had already paid a contractor for. There was some question there about whether they knew about the deadlines and so forth, but I will say that everybody who signs an agreement, whether it's a letter from the CPC or the contract with the mayor, on behalf of the city. Either way, there's clarification in there about the deadlines and so forth. And obviously there's reporting back to the CPC that's required. But in any case, that was relaxed to allow the funds to be released for both last year's project and this one prior to the PR being in place, just so that we weren't holding things up unnecessarily when the PR wasn't really in jeopardy. The rail trail project, this one was a little bit more complicated. There was a fair amount of debate about this one. I won't go into all the background of that unless folks want more detail, but in summary, Councilor Zeid made an amendment, and this was reflected in an attachment that he provided for the council right before the meeting, I think. But it was incorporated essentially by the 4 amendments that said the whole project, instead of being one lump sum of $250, would be broken down into these subcategories. So project 6A was going to be the wastewater treatment plant, soil cleanup and opening of the trail, $50,000 allocated for that specific portion of the project. Now remember that when Jordy submitted the project, it was closing the loops in a couple of different places along the trail. And the council decided they wanted to break it up a little bit more specifically and put caveats on those subsections of the project. Project 6B, they broke it down into the Parker Straight Street crossing, which is $50,000. And a fair amount of that money is actually coming from the state from the Complete Streets program. So we're lucky that that's sort of additional funding provided to sort of fill the gap there. But that project should be proceeding along. We're hopeful that this fall might be under construction and completed before the winter. Project 6C, the rest of it is really for the shoreline protection and revetment, the bike path project. I can go in more background if you want on that project, but the caveat they put on that one was that $150,000, the rest of that $250, could only be used if there was a confirmation from the state, essentially, that we got our MVP, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant, by the end of this calendar year. So it was a little bit convoluted the way that the motion went and everything, but there was a floor amendment made to make it 1.5 million, and then it was reduced to 1.3 based on the actual grant, expectation and so forth. Jordy and I are not keen on this particular amendment. We think it unnecessarily circles the money back to the general pot when it's very well going to be needed for the project regardless, even if a day or two makes a difference here. And we go beyond a threshold, everybody has to circle back again and do the whole process just to get the appropriation. So we don't necessarily think that makes sense, but the council's decided to set that limit, and hopefully we'll get that grant, and that will not be an issue. And we'll really just be filling the gap in that grant. But I did actually attend a meeting earlier this evening with the Water Sewer Commission to talk to them about the potential for them to need to provide gap funding or some funding for that project as well, because it's not just a bike path now, it's really about protecting the treatment plant underneath first. So at any rate, that's what they did. They broke this rail trail gap project down into 3 smaller sub projects for clarity and distinction. Then there's the Artichoke River project. Council Zede had an amendment on this one that all the other funding sources had to be approved, obviously, and in place before the city would, transfer funds for the closing on this open space or CR acquisition. And that'll be something that Jordy will have to, confirm before our finance office, wires any funds for closing. The council wanted to review and approve the purchase and sale agreement, the CR and deeds and so forth. I don't know that that's, that sometimes the council takes a heavier role in those things. Sometimes they don't. It depends on, the composition of the council and their interest. But in this instance, there were at least a couple of councilors interested in seeing the base documents before anything was, signed by the mayor or closed and so forth. Because it's not, the deed is not coming to the city. The city is appropriating funds for this conservation restriction on the land. But the idea is that the land would actually be held by Essex County Greenbelt. So there was some concern there on the council's part that the language be appropriate. So they obviously wanted to have a little check and balance on that. So those were the changes made to the projects. There happened to be a duplicate paragraph in the order as written, which isn't a big deal. And then there was one correction. Again, this is just sort of the cheat sheet, I think, for sort of Caitlin and I in the office. But there was no floor amendment made on these two, so the clerk's office was correcting this before they're having it signed by the council. I don't know if councilors already signed it, but they corrected this because there were no floor amendments made on that project there. So by attaching the amendments, the floor amendments that came from Councilor Zede to this order and those adjustments being so referenced, that is essentially what got approved this time around. They put a little more caveats on what the CPC recommended.
Andy, can you confirm that there was an additional proposed amendment to, I imagine it would be 6B, the Parker Street 50,000, that it be spent only within the jurisdiction of Newburyport, that was not passed?
Yeah, the council order here indicates it sort of goes back and forth, right? You have to read all the lines, but that motion did not succeed. However, that was never really the intent of the project, this application anyway.
Right.
All the funds would have been spent over by where Kelly's Hardware is. So, on that section of Parker Street and State Street. So it wasn't really an issue, but because last year, Jordy and I had tried to pursue some funds and use of those funds at the Parker Street or the Newbury Town line at Parker Street to meet that connection there. And that was rejected by at least 1 or 2 councilors. It was not proposed this time, but there was some anxiety about that. So they made it very clear that in their discussion that they didn't want that, but it was never part of this project and won't be used for that purpose anyway.
Okay. All right. Anybody have any questions or comments about what happened at City Council?
Yeah, this is Paul. The only question I have really is regarding the grant to the Affordable Housing Trust, where they want it to expire on June 30th, 2023. I've always felt that our granting to the Affordable Housing Trust really was that a grant. We gave them the money, and they could use it when and how they saw fit. But there, what you know, the idea of a deadline or expiration date did not apply.
Yeah, I mean, and just to be clear, the city council is the entity that does the actual appropriation, so they can set those limits. The CPC provides the recommendation, and like I said, they put that on the rail trail project this year in addition to the housing trust project.
I know they have the right to do it, but I just don't. That is one that I, you know.
Oh, you have
I
concern.
would think is wrong.
Yeah, we're not. I mean, I wouldn't say that the office supports these types of limitations necessarily. I mean, there might be, you know, in certain cases, it might make more sense. Certainly, where there's a timely grant application involved, and you know, the rail trail, for instance, is one that would concern me quite a bit because it's a very complicated project with, you know, moving pieces, the permitting agencies and all that. But the housing trust, obviously, they wanted to, you know, they put it a few years out, but they did, like you said, put a limit on it. And you know, in my opinion, if that amount of money is going to go towards housing, the housing trust is actually better suited to mobilize those funds because they can actually appropriate those funds directly, whereas the CPC has to recommend it to the city council and then have it appropriated by them. So it only makes sense to me if you're going to spend money on affordable housing to have the trust be the keepers of those funds because they can mobilize it when it's needed.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thanks, Andy, for filling in the gaps.
That's good. Sure.
All right. Does anybody have any other questions or requests for updated information? Number 5 on the list.
No.
Okay. Andy or Caitlin, are there any updates we haven't addressed?
No, can I just ask Caitlin, maybe you could clarify for me, did I know we've been working on our internal tracking list. Does the CPC have a copy of that, or are we following up?
Yes, I sent that out to them so they have it. It's like the open grant list.
Yes.
So they should have that.
We have that. Yep.
Okay. Yep. So that's it. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. All right. Last but certainly not least is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was May 27th, 2020. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I have a question on it. This is Paul.
Yes, Paul.
Towards the end, there's a heading called under final review. And there is a sentence at the end of that first paragraph that says, unallocated balance totaled $11,484. I wasn't sure what that balance was about, and it would seem that, or maybe the number is just incorrect.
You're talking about, in my printed copy, it's probably the second to last page, middle of the page. Yeah. Okay. Let me see. Take a moment. So Jane did her numbers, and okay, the remaining unallocated balance totaled. I guess that was, before the final review and vote. At that point, we had not talked about putting 11,000 of the available monies onto any application. That's the way I read it.
Oh, okay. Well, I was confused because then in the next paragraph it talks about where we upped the grant to open space from 100,000 to 125,000, and at that point, the unallocated balance became 89,000.
89.
So 89 plus 25 would be 114,000.
I think Jane was printing money.
Yeah.
Then my guess would be that was that number is either incorrect or the reference to an unallocated balance has been misheard. Jane, do you have any recollection on that?
No, and I'm having a hard time finding it in the minutes too. So I can pull up the spreadsheet, but I'm pretty sure our numbers were correct that evening. So it may just
Yeah,
be.
oh, yeah, the numbers ended up correct. This is on the draft minutes, second to last page, middle of the page. Final review and vote. And so it's the beginning paragraph of the whole section where we slogged through with the final vote.
Budget, so Jane Healy provided approved funding from the budget totaled $856. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's in there, and it's the 11,000 number at the end of the that paragraph.
Oh, yeah, I don't know what that is.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a little confused on that too. I think it would be harmless to remove that whole sentence.
Yeah, because I have a feeling it really was meant to have been 114,840. Because then when we subtracted 25,000 from 114,000, we get down to the 89.
You get the 89, right?
That might make sense, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think you're right. We could just remove the sentence.
Okay.
Hi, it's Rachel. Sorry about that.
Oh, we got some great feedback there.
Wow, yeah, that was good.
My special sound effects. I have my phone and my computer. Hold on.
Yep. Too close to the computer. Yeah.
Hold on. Can you hear me okay? It's just I can't hear you on my computer, so I had my phone going at the same time.
Okay. Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I'm not echoing anymore?
No.
All right. I'm sorry about that. All right. I apologize for that. Not sure where I got those numbers from. So you want me to just remove the paragraph, or do you want me to go through and change the numbers?
Well, I think what I'll do is I'll entertain a motion that the minutes be amended by removing that sentence, the last sentence in that in the first paragraph under the heading "Final Review and Vote on Application Requests," and that as amended, that the minutes be approved. Got a motion for that?
So moved. This
Okay.
is Paul.
Paul moved.
Jane, second.
Jane seconds. I'm going to do a roll call. All in favor? Jane?
Yes.
Don?
Don Little, yes.
Paul Healy?
Yes.
Mark Rosen?
Yes, sir.
Don Walters?
Yes.
Ron Zimba?
Yes.
The chair votes yes. Okay. Thank you, folks. Is there any other business anybody wants to bring up tonight? Okay, well then stay tuned on the whether or not the next monthly meeting will be held. At our typical cycle, we have often missed both August and September, but October is generally a must-do meeting because that's our annual hearing. And if we're still on this Zoom path, that'll be even more interesting than it's been in the past, where we struggle to have public attendance. So, in any event, that's all I have on schedules going forward. I certainly appreciate everybody coming and being ready for this and having a good discussion. Okay, without any more business, then I think we can adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Okay, all in favor with a voice vote, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks everyone. Good night.
Thanks, Mike.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.